Welcome back, everyone, to the Lawcast. I'm Chris DeSantano, and this is Melanie Thuller. We're both solicitors here at MJT Law, and we're here for another podcast.
We are, and it's, I think, going to be one of our last ones from different locations.
From different locations, yes. We'll be going back to the office very shortly. But I think before we kick off today's discussions, I think there is some congratulations to go around because I think, Melanie, you're quite humble, and I think I'll bring it up that you were listed on Doyle's Guide.
Oh, yes, of course, yes. Doyle's is one of these things that lawyers vote for each other, and I got on to recommended lawyer.
Yeah, so there's probably 10 people on the list in Queensland. So you're top 10. I think that's a really good achievement. And the fact that MJT Law as well got listed as well, which is really good.
Kudos to my team too for doing the work that they needed to do to get on the list as well.
Yeah,
this is true. I'm actually really happy about this because I've got on the list quite a few years in a row, and last year somehow I got bunked off, and I was like really upset about it. And this year I'm back on.
Yeah, no, I think congratulations. It's
very much.
As someone who's early in his career, it's definitely something that I've always flagged as something that I'd like to achieve at some stage in my career. So no, congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy. The other thing that I've been looking into is specialisation.
Yes. So for everyone out there, there is another level of I suppose accreditation. So everyone's just sort of a solicitor, but you can become a accredited specialist in a particular field. For us, it would be, is it workplace relations, or what do they call
workplace law, workplace relations. It's the Victorian Queensland Law Society. Sorry, the Victorian Law Society is doing it this year for me. I've been taking a look at it.
And I mean, for everyone there, I certainly, when you see the little badge that comes there, I respect it because I know that it's tough. I've heard, I suppose, some rumors because they don't release these statistics, but that the pass rate is very, very low in the schemes of things, and there's probably 15, 20 workplace specialists in Queensland, something like that.
I think there are 12.
12, right. So in the entire of Queensland, there's 10,000 lawyers?
Yeah,
something like that goes around. And if there's only 12 workplace ones, then I think it's a pretty good achievement if you can get that.
Yeah, I'm looking into it. I don't know yet because look, there's a lot of study involved, and I went to this thing where you go and learn about the course itself, and a lot of people went, oh no, there's loads of study, there's loads of time, you've got to put loads of time in. And to be quite honest, running a business, being a lawyer at the same time already takes up quite a lot of time. So
nothing in life is without pain, though.
Oh no! So
we all did it in uni. We all did it in uni. It's just we all remember how tough uni was, and it's almost. I know I've mentioned to you before, but the thought of extra learning petrifies me because I remember graduating, and I didn't graduate. My feelings at the end of it were, geez, that was really, really tough. I'm not sure I'm keen to do that anytime soon. So I think we've all kind of got that lingering feeling that makes it just a little bit harder. But I reckon you're in for it. I reckon you'll do pretty well.
Oh well, we'll see if I've got another month before I throw my hat in the ring. I've got to pull together my application because there's this kind of you can't just apply and do it. One has to apply and be considered
your standing amongst the industry must be
Yeah, there's a whole pile of stuff there. I'm probably, talking it up because if I don't get it, everyone's going to think that I'm useless. But it's really not that easy, guys. It is something that is on my mind. I'm actually pretty interested in seeing how that plays out. And it sort of comes from being bolstered by, getting these awards, really stopping and thinking about, am I of a caliber with which this is the sort of thing that I could be doing next? And to be honest, I've been doing this for a long time, so why wouldn't I be?
Well, I know when you first brought it up, you're a bit hesitant, and I said, it's nice to know the imposter syndrome still continues onwards. But you're right. You're on the jaws list for a reason. You've been doing it for long enough now. Your work's good. Why would others be more eligible or better
Well,
than, at some point you have to accept the fact that you might actually be good.
Yeah, it's true. It's just, I think when it comes to law, and I'm sure you feel this too, Chris, is that you cannot guarantee that you're the smartest person in the room ever.
No, in fact, you should assume the otherwise.
Assume that you're not.
If you think you're the best, then chances are you're not, and you'll be found out because of it.
If somebody else is going to be there who knows more about that thing than you do, and this is the thing about law. We are constantly surrounded by people who are, if they're not smarter than us, they're better than us at that particular thing, or they're smarter, or they've thought about this thing in more depth. And you're always challenged with your opinions. You're always challenged with your points of view and your legal analysis. And yeah, it's really nice. In general, I'm actually quite a lot right, which is really nice. But I suspect I'm only right about the things that I talk about because I'm sure that I'm right about them, not because of any, I'm not throwing out, crazy ideas there, not really sure about what the law might be on that point. So anyway. Yes,
enough.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm very, very pleased that MJT Law has got the Doyle's list again on the Doyle's list. I'm actually super pleased about that. There's a couple of other awards that we get, like we also sit on the 3 best.
Yes.
Which is really fun for Brisbane employment lawyers. So that's actually a really fun internet-based award. It's about Google ratings and easeability, if that's even a word, on your website, and how much engagement we get from people out there. And actually, I'm quite proud of that as well, the 3 best list.
I think the 3 best is a really good reflection of MJT as a business. Because Doyle's list, and I apologize to our viewers who don't quite know the difference, but Doyle's list, because it's only voted by other lawyers, it's a great indication of who is good and who is not. But you can be a great lawyer but not necessarily run a particularly great practice, and might not actually reflect in your business, whereas 3 best I think does.
Yeah, 3 best is really fun, isn't it? It's one of these rating website type environments that look at lots of different things and kind of matrix it all together and say, this is what we think. And look, everyone has an opinion, obviously. I mean, this is what the internet's about. Everyone's got an opinion, but I'm actually really pleased that we're on that year after year after year as well, and that we maintain those high Google rankings, that we maintain a really interactive website, that we have podcasts, that we have YouTube channels, that we've got information on our website that helps people actually get on with that without needing a lawyer. What it doesn't take into account, and what we never ever talk about, is our pro bono work. And what people don't realize is that MJT gives away a mad amount of pro bono work.
I think it's about 8 hours a week.
Yeah, it's really
something like that.
One year I did the figures, the calculations, and it's like $200,000 in legal advice.
Well, 8 hours is a fair bit of money.
We give away. And of course, when my accountant sees these sort of figures, he kind of looks at me and says, what you doing? Because of course that's money we could have, but it's not for one thing, it's not easy to say, oh, well, I could have made that $200,000 because but for my pro bono work, I would have had a paying client. Those who are in business
Doesn't
know
quite
it never
count like that.
Yeah, it never scales or scopes like that. We know that those of us who are in business know if, oh, I can't take my lunch break because that means I wouldn't be doing that thing and earning that money. No, people know that that's not actually how it works. But it means that we've helped hundreds,
Oh, it'd be
literally
thousands
hundreds
now. It'd be well and truly in the thousands
of people out there to get their next steps, which I think is really, really rewarding, but something actually we literally never talk about.
Well, we don't talk. I mean, I like putting this out there that lawyers should really see themselves as the helping profession. I know we can get caught up in everything, but you go and see a doctor when you're not feeling very well. You don't go see a doctor when you're feeling great. You go see a lawyer because something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Frankly, 90% of the time, it's because something's gone wrong. You might be doing preventative action, but the preventative action was flagged because something went wrong. And you go see them because you want them to fix a problem. Just as you go see a doctor because you want them to fix something, you want to fix your broken arm or whatever it might be. And that's what we're really here for in the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I know that you've got some things that you want to talk about, so far away.
Yeah, so look, there was this now, interestingly, I can't bring up my Outlook, which is crazy, but
apologies to Microsoft for that comment.
Yeah, I just here we go. I think I've managed to close it. So I can bring it open again. But there's this case that came out a couple of days ago, and I'm going to feed this back to the gig economy because those who are regular watchers of the Lawcast will know that ages ago, probably a year ago now, maybe more, we did this talk on the gig economy and having a side hustle.
Yeah, because I think it's
becoming more
an emerging problem.
Yeah, and I really like this case because this is about working your side hustle while at work, and one of the things that we talked about in our previous podcast was the tolerances that employers have on this, and whether we should have those tolerances or not. So on.
Yeah, we kind of, I think we had some differing opinions, but certainly one thing that we could agree on was, I think it all comes down to prejudice, and it's prejudice to your current employer or your principal employer, and that can be broad. It's not using their time, so don't run your business while you're at work in such a way that you can't also do your work for your employer. Don't use their confidential information is an obvious one. No intellectual property, no conflicts of interest. So don't run one which, in a roundabout way ends up competing with the business, because that's often because of the way we are. We want to do a gig economy, something that we know and do, and what we know and do is what we do for our employer. So there's that temptation.
I mean, a lot of people have these side hustles because they were able to fund it with the money with which they're getting paid.
Yeah, so I think we kind of came to it that in a modern day, it's really just about prejudice. What cost?
Yeah, time. What's been done?
Time, money, information.
And this case came down on the 23rd of February, so it's only a couple of days ago, and it fascinated me because it really pulled in all these concepts. So this employee ran her own business. It was a farm stay, and
like an Airbnb kind of thing.
Like an Airbnb type thing. And she, what's her name? Linda. So Linda had this kind of farm stay, and you can imagine during COVID it would have been really hard to get this up and running. But now everyone's back. Everyone's ready to rock and roll, right? Yep. So she was finding it that her property, that to stay on her farm stay, was becoming increasingly popular, and she was finding it harder and harder to manage the ins and outs of people being all these inquiries and stuff, not during work hours. So that came out, and she came out that she had sent 76 text messages in 5 hours.
5 hours. So
5 hours. So
that's like constant. I don't think I sent 75 a week.
76 divided by 5. I mean, you're just going to look at me and go, what are you thinking, Melanie? It's 15 texts an hour. So if you go 15 divided, so that's like...
That's one every 3 minutes or something.
It's
4 minutes.
It's
that's constant. Because remember, she's also reading the text for which she's sending. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it might take 2 minutes to read and consider and then reply. And you have to also text. You actually have to type out the text.
And she was a bit, and she was told to stop. So they didn't just fire her. She was told to stop.
That's nice. I'm sure.
And she didn't. And she was terminated ultimately for failing to follow a lawful and reasonable direction to have her phone turned off at work. And I think that's a really interesting one, because
probably could have actually fired. They could have fired her. But
yeah, they didn't terminate her.
They did a roundabout way.
They didn't terminate her for using the text too many times. They basically said, look, you need to focus on work. Her job was health and safety and environment and training manager. So
her lack of attention could have potentially led to workplace health and safety.
Yeah, and she was a manager as well, so that tells me that there was other people there that she needed to deal with and so on. So this is apparently she also sent an aggressive email about a personal family law matter from her work email.
So she's like replied to a family law thing just with her email with the banner and everything.
That's right, with her work email address, and for a family law matter. And basically she was told to stop, and she didn't. And they didn't terminate her for any of this stuff. They terminated her for not following a lawful and reasonable direction, for not turning off her mobile phone while it's at work. Nice. What amazes me is this went all the way through to a hearing.
Yeah, what did she argue? Because I've already just in my mind thought of, I mean, I know they went with the lawful and reasonable direction thing, but I'm thinking of like 3 other ways you could have fired her. But what did she argue?
Well, I think it's just, she was arguing that they kept shifting the goalposts, that they weren't giving, giving her an idea of exactly what she needed to do. She just kind of said, look, it wasn't really causing any harm.
That's bizarre. That is absolutely bizarre. Because I'm going to stretch this out a little bit, but if someone is sending that many texts and taking into account how long it would take to read these said texts and send them and type them, etc. Do you think this goes so far as to potentially be a repudiation of the contract? Because she's not working. She's actually not doing anything.
Well, she's denying this. She said she denied she spent a lot of time performing work, her other job while at business hours, and that she took her duties seriously, and that sometimes she had to set an alarm so to remind her that she needed to finish work for the day. So she was such a studious employee that she got caught up in it all. But she denied she sent a lot of texts. And I just, you just look at this and you go, how did this get to a hearing? This kind of pushes to my next kind of pet discussion, I guess, is about how is the unfair dismissal regime working if we've got matters like this going through to a hearing? Someone gets fired for literally running their own business, sending a text at least every 5 minutes.
This thing was doomed to properly doomed.
And this Linda decides, you know what? I'm going to argue this because I have this is just unfair. It's unfair dismissal. I mean, where did the system get hooked up to this point where there are just, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how frivolous this case, really is. I'm not there. I'm not giving the evidence and so on. But it just seems to me like there was, even if the case wasn't doomed to fail, even if it wasn't doomed to fail.
Yeah, because that's a high threshold.
It's a high threshold. What gives Linda this impression that it's perfectly okay for her to run her business out of her job, send all these texts, and then decide that it's not fair that she gets terminated?
Well, it all comes down to, and I'm not sure there's a right answer for this, because we've mentioned this plenty of times before, employment law is tricky because there is a certain higher level of public policy that comes with it when we're thinking about commercial litigation. It comes down to the costs problem, isn't it? Is on one hand, as it stands, costs are very rare. The threshold is extremely high. It basically needs to have no prospects of success. And we frequently rarely see this falling into two main issues where someone might have an adverse costs order coming against them. Is one, they proceeded with the matter which was jurisdictionally faulty. So they proceeded with something that, putting aside the facts, they hadn't worked there for long enough, or they just the proceedings that they brought made no sense whatsoever. Jurisdictionally had no chance, or they basically didn't accept, or they rejected an offer which was higher than the amount for which they could possibly earn. And when I say possibly, I'm not saying like a prospects type thing. I'm talking they've got another job, 4 weeks, and it's the same or more than they were earning before. So their compensation is genuinely capped at that 4 weeks, and they got offered 6 weeks, and they said no to that because that's completely unreasonable. We're not talking, I was going for 26 weeks, and chances are I was probably not going to get it. We're not really talking about that. So it's pretty rare, but it means you allow, if this type of regime is there, you allow these types of cases where it's not no prospects, but it's extremely low.
Yeah, I mean, this one had, and the reason why I'm guessing she brought the matter to the commission was because there's some procedural problems with the way they did it. They didn't apart from complaining to her about, turning off her phone, or there was a couple of occasions they didn't give her an opportunity to respond. When they gave her termination letter, they said, you did this, 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 and this on these days. And one of those days, they didn't give her a chance to talk about it. But the commission basically said, well, yeah, I get that, but it's not enough to mitigate the conclusion that it was a serious reason and it was a valid reason to dismiss. And it's really interesting because during the height of the pandemic, and I think we can use the word now, and it's hard to know on these things. We called it what did we call it for a while? We called it.
No, I think we called it. I was calling it the global crisis.
The global crisis. That's it. Yeah, right.
But now there's some other global crises, so that's probably a broad.
Yeah, we can't.
Broad.
There's a few things going on here. Well, during the previous global crisis or the pandemic, there were a crazy number of redundancies.
Yeah.
And most of them probably could have had better procedural processes.
Yeah, they're a little bit gung-ho.
They're a
bit of the law, they're a little bit gung-ho.
They're a bit gung-ho, but the commissions were allowing them over the line, regardless of the procedural complexities or the procedural problems. And I don't think, and certainly we don't come across many employers who turn to us and say, how do we terminate this person with as little work as possible? No one comes to us and says that. They come to us and say, you know, we've got this problem. We think we need to terminate. What is the right way to do that?
Yeah.
You know, no one's coming to us and saying, how do we do this with the least amount of work?
No, but there is maybe a potential confirmation bias here where the fact that they're coming to see us indicates that they want to do it right.
Yeah, look,
I think a lot of the procedural cases is where it actually never occurred to them that they never had that stop go moment. We talked about and I apologize, I don't know that I've forgotten the name, but the bird case last
yes,
podcast.
yes.
Had they have seen the
galah.
lawyer, the galah, had they seen the lawyer, I think it would have been a different decision and a different process. But you're right though. For the most part, it's not malice. It's usually just a lack of awareness more than anything.
Yeah, I've got two more.
Go on.
First one is this is a matter close, I think, to your heart, Chris, because you've been doing quite a lot of work on this. This is about Facebook and posting out of hours and how the employer can be caught up in these and termination. So so I thought this was an interesting one. The ACTU,
Being the union.
the Australian Council of Trade Unions, terminated this person for posting some rather tasty Facebook messages,
Right.
which were, I think the language was racist. So there was some really kind of rather distasteful Facebook messages that were posted, and yeah, they terminated. And I'm just going to touch this lightly. I think the fascinating thing about this is this keeps coming up. This is something that is actually a problem now. We've got people who are Facebooking and texting in the evening, and yeah, how does it negatively impact your employer? This one was in relation to reputation and credibility of the ATCU can be negatively impacted when it says one thing like supporting the LGBTQIA plus workers, and someone who acts consistently with that by espousing a value or public position against it.
Yeah.
So just talking about this Facebook, just really quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, so this person had a lot of followers. The posts were unsavoury, and it got back to the employer. Found the employer made a decision that it was they were taking at the time all these progressive advertisements and stuff to promote or to deal with workplace issues in relation to LGBTQIA plus domestic violence measures and things like this, and these Facebook posts just
we're directly
we're really
inconsistent with that.
But again, this is another case that, you know, someone gets fired for putting rather unsavoury, shall I say, Facebook messages up, and it goes all the way to a hearing. How did that happen?
Well, I mean, I like where the law is going when it comes to social media. Call me a bit of a party pooper or whatever it might be, but I'm very much of the view that every employee is an actor for their employer, whether they like it or not. In the modern day, they are, you know, they may as well be there on the corner with a, you know, full branding, waving a sign around, because what you say and do in your public life is absolutely a reflection of where you work. And you know, we often get these kind of questions. Well, it's not fair. That's my life. But there's a simple answer to that: is you don't need to. You can say whatever you want, but you're not going to say it well employed at that particular organization. Because the fact of the matter is businesses, they get judged on that. They get judged on that.
Does this feed into all areas, though? I mean, we're talking about Facebook posts, but this is a really interesting one from a business owner. for those who don't know, and this is probably a bad idea because apparently Australians don't trust people who don't drink, but I don't drink alcohol. I don't drink alcohol for a number of reasons. And so I don't drink when I go out and have fun with my team in the evenings, or go to work dues, or go to,
networking events, and
yeah, I mean, and also I don't drink when I spend time with my family, and so on and so forth. And I've always considered employees who go out to these parties and get sloppy drunk to be behaving really inappropriately. Just because the alcohol is free should not mean that it just, you can slather it, across the board and just go nuts, because A, it's on your employer's dime, and B, where's it say in their employment contract it's okay to get totally sloppy drunk at a work function?
No, it's not. It's not. One of I'm going to use a euphemism that I got from a reality TV show. It's the show Below Deck. Basically, it's about a whole bunch of young people who
this is your reality thing, isn't it?
Love my reality TV shows. But anyway, so the captain there, he's a pretty kind of stern but fair sort of guy. And he says at the start of every season to all the new employees, there's 2 rules: don't embarrass yourself, don't embarrass the boat. And I think that stacks up when it comes to social media. It stacks up to out of office functions, office functions. If you don't embarrass yourself, then you're not embarrassing the company. And that comes to the fact that you are an actor. You are representative of the company for which you work. And that's everywhere. And
it's simply harder on a cruise boat because you're stuck on it. But certainly, as an employee, say here in Brisbane, you're not living, drinking, eating, sleeping, work. So go home and get sloppy drunk.
Yeah.
Go out with your mates and get sloppy drunk. Don't go to work functions and get sloppy drunk.
And well, even if you're doing it in your own time and whatever, don't go and do it and tell everyone that
don't hand out your business card.
Don't hand out your business card. Don't wear a polo with, MJ Taylor written on it. Don't wear people need to be far more aware of the fact that their reputation of the business really is on the line when they act in their personal lives. And I think the law should really reflect that, because in the end of the day, it will have a financial effect on the business.
I think it does, but it also has this trust, loyalty, fidelity thing as well. I mean, an employer really doesn't want to know what their employees get up to in their spare time. For a start, we shouldn't care about that, and we really don't want to find out. But sometimes those lines are blurred just a little bit, and it can be a little bit more information than what we need. And people should keep their private lives private from work. I don't need to find out every little bit that happens to people. It's kind of interesting like that. I've got, sorry, just to peter off and just to disappear into the ether on this one. So that was, I like that one because, first of all, we've been dealing with that social media thing, and we've been dealing with it for a while. And for those of you who don't know, we've actually been running some training programs, and one of them is about social media and vicariously liable, and when it might be appropriate to terminate and so on. I just I find this social media thing to be, I guess because we're all at home, we're all distracted, or we're all just that little bit separated from our jobs, we find it easier to get up to that sort of mischief.
Yeah.
On a different note, and I'm not sure what you've got, if you've got anything.
No, fly away. For everyone out there, by the way, the hardest part about this podcast is figuring out what you want to talk about. So for any kind of producers out there for TV, film, radio, whatever it might be, congratulations to you, because certainly something that I've learned since we've been doing the podcast is actually it's really hard. It's really hard to figure out what you want to talk about.
Content is a tricky one. I've got this really interesting one. So for people out there who who don't know, more often than never. So a surprising number of people get asked to change venues in their employment. They have to work from, instead of one place, they have to work at a different place. And that causes a little bit discomfort for the employee.
Are we talking like the whole office moves, or are we talking?
Yeah, office moves, or you're transferred.
You move from one, transfer to another.
Yeah, transferred to a different spot. Yeah,
Premises.
and for those of you who are not in Brisbane, Brisbane is a city that is based on a river. We have the Brisbane River, and there's kind of a north and south aspect to the Brisbane River.
And anyone that lives in Brisbane knows that the north is better, but that's just my
Chris is saying because he's on the north side, whereas I live on the south side. So Brisbane essentially is on the Brisbane CBD is on the north side, but only just. It is sitting on the edge on the Brisbane River, which makes it a very beautiful city. But there have been clients of ours who've come to us and said they're asking me to now do work on the south side, or they're asking me to do work on the north side, and there's this concept. So what comes up a fair amount is how much of a change this is to their employment. And this one's a really interesting one, because normally we get clients saying, my employer wants me to move, and they're saying it's not a material change in my employment, or it's not a redundancy, or it's not that.
Yeah, because there's a redundancy that kind of flows from.
And in fact, it's just your contract says that we can shift you locations, and so we're doing that. This is something a little bit different. This is Crown Sydney, so the
casino.
Casino, yeah. So they've got a Crown Melbourne and a Crown Perth. Now what they wanted to do is take a pile of people from Melbourne and Perth and put them. Now I'm going to set aside the political drama of what's happened in Sydney when it comes to casinos, and the licensing issues.
It's wise to stay away from allegations of money laundering.
No, just anyone who wants to Google that, it's a matter for them. And I'm going to stay well away from that. And what they're doing is they're setting up a private club. And interesting enough, England has piles and piles of private casinos.
Can you that's completely foreign to me. What is that?
It's a casino where you can only get into if you are a subscriber or a member. Member-only casinos.
Oh, so they're kind of getting you for money in more ways than one. That's kind of clever.
Yeah. So I think they're wanting to create, and I could be wrong here, but I think they're wanting to create a private casino. So what they're doing is they're asking people from Melbourne and Perth to go and work in this private casino. Now they are trying to achieve a different goal here. They want to be completely separated from the enterprise agreements and so on. And they're trying to say that it is, what's the language that they were using? Not a transfer of business. So they were trying to argue that the move from working in this casino as a croupier, croupier, is that the right word? Croupier?
I don't know. I'd say just the dealers or
dealers, okay, as a dealer, and although it is work, it is it's not a transfer of business. You're not transferring that employee from one business to another business. It is a whole new business. Although it's still Crown, and they're still doing exactly the same thing.
And can I take a punt in saying that they are going to say it's the same or substantially the same job, such that they don't need to pay a redundancy? Or
this is not about redundancy. This is actually about the enterprise agreement and whether it gets extinguished by asking these people to go from A to B.
Right. So what's the arguments that need to be had?
So the argument is, so the Crown Sydney sort of declaration that employment of the transferred employees did not constitute a transfer of business, so that so the enterprise agreement wouldn't apply. And the justice, justice said it wasn't a transfer of business. Even though those new employees were doing something exactly the same, says here, the task says if the tasks to be performed by the transferred employees of the Crown Sydney will be substantially the same as the tasks performed in Melbourne or Perth, they will be performing these tasks in Sydney in a new facility in a new business enterprise. The existing facilities in Melbourne and Perth will continue to be operated by Melbourne and Crown Perth. The distinguished cases where an employer proposed transfer with employees with an existing business from one location to another proximate location when the employees continue to do the same work in the existing business at the new location. In such cases, location may not be relevant whether the work was the same or substantially the same, but it was relevant in this case. And the fact that Crown Sydney would not be available to the general public, so the facilities and tasks to be performed by them would be different for those in Melbourne or Perth. It's just such a narrow distinction.
That's a nuance.
Such a narrow distinction.
I thought it would have just been as simple as their jobs are substantially, I think, different. I mean, I know they're doing the same roles and duties, but they're in an entirely different state.
Look, that made a difference. Obviously, that made a difference. But in this case, it was about the work. So no transfer of business because Section 311 was not satisfied. This provision requires that the work of the employee performs with the new employer is the same or substantially the same.
And so it was about whether they
were dealing with the public or not.
I mean, I don't know a lot about casinos, but I would have thought, the type of dealer you'd want from Sydney, from Melbourne or Perth is probably going to be one who's more than just the one who's playing on the $10 tables. So they're used to that type of
clientele. Yeah.
Clientele, and I would have thought that would be largely the same.
I really like this case because I don't know whether it's an outlier or it doesn't make any sense.
I think the fact that they're in a different state is probably enough in my eyes. I mean, I don't know much about dealing, but I can't imagine it's one where you just, go around the world all the time.
Well, there was no transfer of business. So, I don't think that it turned on the location. It turned on the work they were doing. The location may not be relevant to whether the work was the same or substantially the same.
Well, there you go. But I suppose to broaden the discussion, when it comes to location, I know it's a bit of how long's a piece of string, but for everyone out there, what are we thinking about when it comes to material change, when it comes to location only? Like, assume everything else is the same pay, same job, like the whole office is essentially moving.
Well, I mean, we've had case after case that just don't make any sense in this space. Spotless. Years ago, Spotless made a whole pile of people redundant, but said, we're not paying you redundancy because we've offered you a job in New Zealand.
In an entirely different country.
An entirely different country.
Under a different set of laws as well, it should be said.
The Commission held it up. It said, since you offer this job in New Zealand, we don't have to pay redundancy.
See, that doesn't make sense to me.
But then we get other cases where, moving across town is too far.
Yeah, 30, 40 kilometres can be too much. I mean, doesn't a lot of it come down to the circumstances of the business and the people involved at the time at which they became employed in the first place?
Maybe, but remember, we've got, this is how the Fair Work Act just shifts, because we've got, provisions in the Fair Work Act that talk about, the difficulty it poses upon the employee if you make these changes. Like, you might change the hours of an employee just off the bat without considering their circumstances, for instance. That person might be a day worker and all of a sudden you want to make them work nights, but they've got children or a sick relative or, something's happening that makes it you know, or maybe
Yeah,
they don't drive and there's no public transport, or, you know, there's.
They accepted the job in the first place based on the premise of what their job looked like at that very
Mhm.
point in time, because it's suitable to their life, or they might have molded their life around those circumstances such that if you were to change it drastically, that, you know, the job is no longer suitable for them.
Yeah, and so we have that, you know, those sections of the Fair Work Act to consider, and then we've got stuff like this, where, you know,
Well, because
or
you should,
Scotland, where you can move to New Zealand and that's fine. It's
well, the tasks one is always a very interesting, because it comes to restructuring and moving people around in a business, and it can often be quite difficult to determine what exactly someone does on a day to day. You know,
yeah.
for a lot of people, it's not just as easy as what's in their position
Yeah,
description and
reporting.
reporting structures is a different
This
one.
is a big one that comes up for us, isn't it? We've got somebody who reports directly to the CEO, and they have 15 people to manage, and they've got a job title of, I don't know, executive technology officer or something,
Manager,
a
yeah.
technology manager. You know, they've got some, you know, title that makes no sense in
Sounds good.
reality. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they've got a situation where their entire team has moved away and they just get told to focus on their job, you know, whatever.
Yeah, they kind of become a manager. They've moved, although their title might not change, they moved from basically being a manager to basically being a busy bee.
And now they've, you know, they stuff someone between, as a direct report between them and the CEO, and all of a sudden it looks like a massive demotion, but there's nothing changed about their title or their wages. Now, most employees will say, no, you're ruining my career. People are going to look at it and go, what the hell did I do wrong to deserve this? And yeah, they're going to look at it poorly. Why isn't this a redundancy? And employers would argue, well, all we're doing is changing things around. Your job hasn't changed. The major stuff that you're doing hasn't changed. But in fact, there is a perception there that there's a massive difference. And we know that the courts have considered those changes in the past. But then we look at this and go, okay, we'll look at the spotless thing and go, okay.
Fair enough.
Honestly, I don't think it's as rock solid or easy to predict as we want it to be.
Unfortunately, it's really one that it's prime for litigation, because it is that. For most cases, I mean, when someone gets 20% demotion, you know, in their pay, then that's a pretty easy one. But for most cases, it's sort of how long is a piece of string, and you know how much of a change. You might agree that there is a change, but how much of it in reality is it? And you can argue that for days. And just as same with location, for most of the time, we're not talking about moving from, you know, Brisbane to Perth. We're talking, you know, moving from, you know, 60 kilometers down the road. That depends. Depends about where the 60 kilometers is. You know, 60 kilometers, you know, regionally might not make any difference, but 60 kilometers in the middle of Sydney might.
This is true. How easy is it to get to that spot?
How much
There are
notice have
plenty
you
of people
given
who live in the Gold Coast, which is more than 60 kilometres away, and travel to Brisbane. But there's a lot of people I speak to in Brisbane who'd say that they would never, ever do that. So I don't know. It's an interesting one. We've had a few interesting cases today. We've got some lady who thought it was perfectly acceptable for her to run her business out of work.
Yeah, basically, I think basically did no work. If I'm thinking the timing.
I think if you read the case, she would argue that she got on, and this is the thing that we talked about. What if you get your job done, or the perception is that you get your job done, and you still have this side hustle? Is that okay? I mean,
I think it's okay, but I think chances are that wasn't what was happening if we really dug deep.
I still think, I mean, and this is where if anybody wants to go back and watch that podcast, I think this is where the conflict came in the last time. I don't care whether they get on with your job. You got to focus 100% on it, dude. I'm paying you to be here. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? So she obviously argued that, you know, it didn't make a difference. she's still getting her job done. And we do hear that from time to time from some people.
Hear that, but
especially in this work from home thing. Like, we know now that there's a lot of conflict in the workplace about employers wanting people to come back to work, and the employees going, well, I work perfectly fine from home. Why can't I stay here? But that's not the point.
That's not the point.
It's not the point. Yeah, and that's the problem. So we've got that case. We've got the issue with
social media. You can't. You're an actor for your employer, so don't just post whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, discriminatory.
You can post. Actually, you can post whatever you want, just not while you're employed.
Anti-vaccine and discriminatory posts. It's going to look poorly upon your employer, who's actually doing campaigns to try and promote those things. And whether doing the same job but for private interview,
private people rather than the public,
it makes all the difference. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, it's good to know we're in February, late February, and the employment sphere, I think, is moving faster than ever. It's really ramped up in the last kind of month about different cases, different pieces of legislation is getting passed through, or at least being proposed. I think it's going to be a bit of a busy year, I think.
It is going to be a busy year. I'm still trying to think about how this new High Court decision, which we talked about last time, impacts on our clients. And I can see, and I was doing a bit of reading about this, and some law firms are highly politicising it now that we're in the middle of a election year and what might happen.
Yeah, well, certainly, I know that we spoke about this last week, but I think there will be legislation to address it, and depending on which way the election is, about how that looks.
Yeah, I'm not going to lay my hat just yet on which way this is going to end up. I just I'm a real substance, not the form type of girl. I mean, yes, I do draft contracts for a living, and I do love that, and I like putting form into agreements. But I also believe that employment contracts and agreements have more life in them than that. But
I agree.
Maybe.
I think going with form over substance in a strict sense. I'm happy for form to be very persuasive, but not determinative. It's rife for what I consider to be kind of gotcha moments. When things start going well, poorly, turning back to the contract, knowing full well that you didn't really, you were happy to let it slide when things were fine, but then when things push comes to shove and things gone worse, you go, gotcha. The contract says that, and I don't think that achieves outcomes that is particularly good for society.
Well, you're not going to achieve a happy workforce, that's for sure. Yeah. Well,
but on that note,
we've talked everyone to death today. Hopefully they're still awake.
Well, it's 10 o'clock in the morning.
10 o'clock for us. I don't know when people are watching this.
That's great. I think I just committed one of the cardinal sins when it comes to recording. I think you're always supposed to make it not time based, but
right.
Well. But on that note, thank you everyone for listening in, and we'll be again in a couple of weeks.
Yes, thank you for listening to the Lawcast, everyone, and catch you later. Thanks for watching and listening.
See ya.